accessibility etiquette for teams. And it will be presented by myself and my colleague. Kelsey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kelsey Kowalski. I'm a senior digital accessibility specialist here at Accessible Web.
Thanks, Kelsey. And I am Hope Ballwine. I am a digital accessibility specialist here at Accessible Web. All right, let's get started. So, a few things that we're going to be covering today. We are going to start with why accessibility etiquette matters, and then move on to the chat, accessible internal communications, followed by the video call, inclusive virtual meetings, and then we're going to cover lightly the conference, thoughtful in-person events, and wrap it up with building accessibility into team culture. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Kelsey for the next slide.
Hi, so first we wanted to talk about why accessibility etiquette matters and really the many benefits that come with that for your teams and in your professional communication. And with the main idea here is that inclusive workplaces have smoother communication, that accessibility etiquette is good for being more effective and more efficient in our professional lives. One thing I really want to emphasize is that you already work with people with disabilities. So whether that's internally in your organization, maybe outside vendors or contractors that you work with, or clients and customers, there are people with disabilities in your professional sphere. If no one is coming to mind for you in this moment, keep in mind that disabilities may be undisclosed. They may be invisible, temporary, or situational. So even if you're not aware of a particular person coming to mind who's disabled or who has shared their disability with you, there are people in your professional sphere who have disabilities and who may rely on accessibility etiquette to get the information they need. I wanted to share a story from one of my previous roles where I didn't follow good accessibility etiquette. I was working on improving the accessibility of our website, and I needed our developer to help me with some changes. So I'd written a long, detailed email about these changes I needed to our code, and I decided I'm going to use some color coding to communicate what I need. So green for add this, red for remove this, orange for I have a question, let's talk about this more. I did all this. I had this nice explanation about what all the colors meant, and I sent it off to my developer. And some of you may already have caught what element was missing from the email that I sent off. And I get an email back from my developer, and he says, "Hey, I'm a little bit colorblind, and I can't see any of your color coding. Can you share the information in a different way?" So I had made the mistake of conveying certain information using color alone and hadn't thought about that not everyone perceives color in the same way that I do and was going to be able to still get that same information. So I'm so grateful to my colleague for reaching back out to me, for being willing to disclose his disability and let me know what he needed in order to be successful. And I also wish that I had been using those good accessibility practices so that he wouldn't have had to do that. He would have just had the information up front that he needed. So this story to me really reflects some of the impacts of good accessibility habits in our professional communication. First is that accessible routines lead to smoother communication and better experiences. By not creating an accessible communication up front, I cost us both time. Our developer had to take time to reply to me to get more information. I had to take time to redo my email, and I could have just made it accessible in the first place, and he would have immediately had the information that he needed to get started. Second, accessibility becomes business as usual and not a special project. This is another piece of kind of the mistake that I made was I was really focused and thinking about the website accessibility and thinking about it as a specific project and not thinking about how those same principles applied in other areas of my professional life and my professional communications. And finally, teams are better oriented to meet legal or contractual accessibility requirements. When teams are already thinking about and practicing strong accessibility internally, they're going to better understand and appropriately respond to external accessibility needs, whether that's legal requirements, contractual obligations, or accessibility barriers that are reported by our clients or customers. Similarly, since I did make that mistake with that email, I'm much more likely to not make that same mistake in other areas in terms of using color alone to convey information and pairing color with things like text or icons or other pieces of information that don't rely on color and still get the same information across. So I definitely, that conversation with my colleague really stands out to me and helps me to do a better job at that accessibility practice going forward. Next slide, please. So during this presentation, Hope and I are going to be talking about a number of concrete steps that you can take to make your communication more accessible. It is not a comprehensive list, but at the same time, we don't want you to get overwhelmed by all of these possible things that you could be doing. We support progress over perfection here. So our challenge to you is to be on the lookout for one concrete step you can take to make your workplace communications more accessible. So think about, there's something we bring up and you have the thought of, I could start doing that today or this week. That's our, if that happens for you, then I would consider this a successful presentation. And I'm going to hand it off to Hope for our first category of professional communication.
Thanks, Kelsey. So we're going to start with the chat, and this could be either like any form of internal communication, like emails, internal chats, or phone calls. So let's start with some first steps to start addressing if your current software and technology is accessible. What software do you use? It could be Microsoft Outlook or Teams. It could be Gmail, Slack, whatever you use. Also think of what kind of phones do you utilize, such as do you still use analog phones? An analog phone is a phone that uses electronic transmission through phone lines, whereas cell phones use the mobile network. So think about what kind of phones you utilize every day. After you've laid out which communication software and technology you use, start examining what tools are already available to you. So, like for example, in Slack, we have live captioning for huddles. Alt text can be added to images, emojis are clearly labeled, and my personal favorite is that the ability to stop animation, like for GIFs or videos. So, take some time and explore these features. Finally, you're going to want to talk to your team or your company and see if they know about these features and if they use them. If the answer is yes, then great. You're ahead of the game. But if the answer is no, it might be a good time to start planning on having some training on those tools and to encourage them to start using them. So let's move on to some specifics to consider when using your software, starting with internal chats or emails. A good habit is to always include alt text with images and screenshots. Provide a short description and don't include the file name because most of the time the file name is not going to be relevant. Um, as and then for GIFs and emojis, always check the description. Emojis come with a label already assigned to them. GIFs may not already have a label assigned to them, so make sure that A, it does have a label, and B, that that label matches the description of the message you want to convey. Thinking past the visual components, let's cover some good practices for text. When it comes to creating messages, try to avoid walls of text and break it down into bullet points. Lists can make text easier to digest. Another thing to remember is that proper formatting to ensure headings and other semantic information is properly communicated. This helps with assistive technology like screen readers to identify key parts of the text and present it to the user, kind of like a roadmap. Another thing to consider is how notifications are sent. Does it send a notification sound, or is there a secondary method for notifying someone, like a short vibration? You want to make sure that everybody gets the message and that you're not excluding people because they didn't either hear it or they didn't receive the notification. So these are a couple things to consider when working with internal chat or emails. Lastly, we're going to touch on calls, whether it's a conference call or just individual calls in between the office. Explore your phone options and see if they're compatible with assistive technology, as some phones are equipped to do so. Cell phones have come so far, and Bluetooth technology is incredible, as it can connect directly to hearing aids or other assistive devices. I had an update on my personal phone the other day and saw a new feature for live transcription during a phone call. Another easy habit is to start to remind colleagues and teams that speaking clearly is important enunciation, enunciating as best as they can so transcription can accurately present what they are saying in text. But also expect hiccups. Technology is not perfect, but getting in the habit means what that while technology is advancing, you're along for the ride. All right, that wraps it up for this slide. Let's pass it back to Kelsey for the next one.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about the video call and ways that we can aim for inclusive virtual meetings. And it really broke down into the two categories. First is things to do before the call, and then things that you can do during the call. So before a video call, we recommend that you share agendas and materials in advance and in accessible formats. Give attendees an opportunity to look things over and to process some of those materials before they're expected to engage or discuss them in a meeting can be really helpful. Invite attendees to communicate access needs. Make it clear that you are open to understanding and meeting accessibility needs when people are willing and comfortable sharing those with you. Provide flexible platform choices if possible. I know that's definitely the larger a video call gets, a virtual meeting, the harder that can be to do. But when possible, it can be great to ask attendees what platform may work best for them, and they can let you know what platform they prefer. And it can be for any reason that they prefer it, which may be related to a disability or not. Also, as if you're the meeting host, be sure to enable any platform accessibility tools such as captioning, transcripts, or text chat. And we definitely recommend getting in the habit of enabling those tools, even if you're not specifically aware that someone in the meeting has requested them or relies on those technologies. Just be in the habit of automatically enabling them, and people can use them when they need to. A great example is captioning. So someone may turn on the captions because they're deaf or hard of hearing. They may turn on the captions because they have an audio processing disability. They may turn on the captions because there's a lawnmower running outside their window. So there's all sorts of reasons why, when, and how these technologies are useful. And just getting in the habit of enabling them means that they're available whenever someone may need them. During the call itself, be flexible on personal user settings. So this can be things like being flexible as to whether attendees have their cameras on or off, whether they participate via microphone or via text. So where you can, being flexible with how users have set up their meeting and how they engage with the meeting makes it so that people can use the option that works best for them in that moment. We also strongly recommend self-introductions, not just at the start of a meeting, but also when the speaker changes. So it's always clear who is speaking at any given time. Now, Hope and I, since we're doing a prepared presentation, are sort of introducing each other as we hand off. But in a meeting, it can be as simple as, hey, Kelsey here, or this is Kelsey, just so it's clear who's begun speaking. This is really valuable for people who are not looking at the screen visually. This could be people who are blind or low vision, could be someone who's joined via telephone or is, listening in as they're driving their car and isn't looking at the screen, or people who are using the captions get a much clearer sense of who's currently speaking. So this is a great practice to follow and makes the meeting a lot more inclusive for everyone. Some other practices that are good are to speak one at a time, such as maybe using a raise hand tool to help control the flow of information, and so people aren't unintentionally speaking over each other. If there are chat comments or questions coming in, to read those aloud so that everyone has the same information about what's currently being discussed or responded to. And also, if you're sharing any visuals or presenting a screen share, to be sure to describe those visuals. This is both, again, really useful for people who aren't looking at the screen visually, also really useful for people who are seeing what you're presenting, but maybe aren't sure what you're trying to draw attention to or what the meaning of the image or what's being presented is. It helps create a shared understanding and a shared context for everyone on the call. And I'm going to hand it over to Hope for our next category.
Thanks, Kelsey. Okay, so next one, we're going to talk about the conference, so thoughtful in-person events. One thing I'd like to point out first is to remember how many people come together to make a conference or an event. Think about all of the parties involved, including participants, presenters, vendors, venue staff, your staff, and more. The key to a good, accessible in-person event is the planning phase. So before the events, make sure you're doing proactive outreach to both presenters and participants. Ask them if they require accessibility accommodations. It starts a clear line of communication between you and them. Another point is to inquire and inspect the physical space that will be used. What accessibility features are available at the venue? You can also include questions to your presenters and participants, such as would a quiet space be beneficial? While you are doing this portion of the planning and learning process, it's always recommended to have a backup plan. I've learned from several conferences and trainings that technology is great at choosing opportune moments to either break or not work with a venue setup. Contingency plans are wise when situations inevitably go sideways, especially with technology, which ties into my next point. It's also a good idea to send out presentation and activity materials beforehand. I understand that sometimes this isn't always possible for one reason or another, but it is invaluable to many people so they can review it with their own personal assistive technology or devices prior to attending. It also offers opportunities for people to prepare for an in-person event. Like if a person knows there's going to be an activity with walking, they can wear comfortable shoes. If a person needs additional technology to help them hear during a roundtable, they can either bring their own device or request one from the conference. Another good idea is that if there's an open Q&A, move away from the typical format of having a lone microphone on a stand and maybe switch it up and switch to either a volunteer or a staff member that walks around to that person speaking and holds the microphone for them. People may have difficulty either adjusting the microphone stand or don't have the mobility or strength to hold the microphone for a period of time. This helps us move to the during the event. I'm going to start with a short story about my service dog, Juno, and I at a library conference. So, the conference center we were at had multiple floors, and I had to get to the second floor. The immediate option was an escalator, and Juno had never seen one before. His reaction was in true husky fashion as he firmly planted himself in a sit and refused to move. I wanted to attend a specific presentation, so I quickly walked around the escalator and found the stairs. Now I understand it's comical to see a husky doing normal husky things, but it really would have been a great help to us if someone had pointed out that there was more than one way of getting upstairs. This leads into my point on social interactions during an event. Prepare your staff and presenters on basic etiquette for social interactions during the event. I'm sorry, for handling situations that may arise. For example, if there is a service animal team, they can only ask two questions. Is this a service animal? And what tasks does this service animal perform? These questions are laid out by the ADA. Now, most people aren't aware of this, and so they just launch into it, 1,000 questions. But if you have previously prepared your staff so that they know these are the only questions you can ask, that's really helpful to both the participant and your staff. Also, ensure that your staff knows the accessibility features, like where the elevators are, or how do I use this conference provided assistive technology during a presentation. It sounds like a lot, but the results are you get a smooth operation for all parties. Another key point is accessible presentations. We're not going to do a deep dive into this one because on March 5th, Accessible Web will be having another webinar. Accessible presentations, practical techniques for accessible slide decks. We're leaving you on a cliffhanger for this one. I'm going to pass it back to Kelsey so we can start our wrap up.
So we've talked a lot about a lot of concrete ways that you can incorporate accessibility, but really the goal here is to build accessibility into team culture. And that may look a few different ways depending on your team, depending on the tools that your organization uses and the type of work that you do. But there are some clear strategies that can help build accessibility into your culture and make your work life more accessible overall. First is to plan ahead. Planned accessibility is more successful. So we've talked a lot about things like planning, training, being aware of tools and resources that are available, and these are all really key to creating a more accessible work culture. A second point is to be consistent. Consistent accessibility is more effective. Setting the example builds an overall culture of accessibility. And like in the case with my email with my developer, being more consistent with my accessibility would have meant that he only needed to disclose his disability if and when he needed to or felt comfortable doing so, rather than creating a situation where he felt he had to. So all of these things of planning ahead and being consistent are going to help make a smoother experience overall and make communication more accessible by default so people can just get on with the work that we're doing as a team. I'm going to pass it to Hope for our last 2 points.
Thanks, Kelsey. So our final points are kind of tied together, as it's true that knowledge is power. The more familiar you are with accessibility and its requirements, the more confident you will be when a situation arises. For example, if you see a service dog in a restaurant, it's not going to throw you for a loop. There is a negative stigma around disabilities, and a way to fight that is to be aware that they exist, but more importantly, disabilities are only one part of a person. Shifting to a person first mentality that disabilities do not define a person. It's only one part of a greater whole. Recognize the person first, and the rest will just flow. You've already taken a big step by coming to these webinars and acknowledging you want to know more. Now take that first question we asked in the beginning of the presentation. What is one concrete step you can make to make your workplace communications more accessible? And that brings us to how can accessible web help?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for the presentation today, guys. So if you join us regularly, you know that we offer a comprehensive range of accessibility services and tools here at Accessible Web. I'm about to drop a coupon code in chat right now. This is a coupon code for Accessible Web Ramp, which is a platform that enables automated monitoring, but also has comprehensive manual auditing features as well. So if that's something that your company or organization does in-house, Accessible Web Ramp is a great tool for helping manage that. We also offer full manual audits here at Accessible Web and UX testing by assistive technology users, in addition to consulting and training. So basically, if you have any accessibility needs or questions about tooling, please let us know. We're readily available via our website, of course, and here on Thursdays. But